An American college student undergoes a routine tuberculosis screening. She is studying to be a teacher, and in order to complete her student teaching, clearance through health screenings is required. The doctor walks in to give her the results. She is shocked to learn that she is not only positive for latent tuberculosis, but that she has a large benign cyst in her lung that impairs her breathing. She will have to take a year's worth of daily antibiotics and undergo a laborious surgery to remove the cyst from her lungs. The current size of the cyst is already impairing her breathing, and she is told that the cyst will only grow larger and eventually prevent her from taking in any oxygen at all. The doctors want to operate quickly. She was intending to go on a summer vacation for a month, though. She already purchased her plane ticket to leave, and she tells this to her doctors. The doctors explain that she is taking a risk delaying surgery by a month, but if she decides to go, they would have to operate after she returns, because the road to recovery will be long and painful. They want her to be near them just in case she suffers any complications after the surgery. She decides to go on her vacation and delay the surgery. That night, the girl dreams a strange dream. She is at a funeral where she does not feel sad and does not know the deceased, nor is she able to make out the identity of the person in the coffin. Nobody else seems to be in despair either. She is then approached by a beautiful woman with a youthful face and gray hair. She is wearing garments made from rich, expensive fabrics of deep colors, and her clothes are adorned with an abundance of large, brilliant jewels. She is also wearing a large jeweled crown on her head, and the light reflects off of her jewelry with radiant brightness. In all her finery, she reminds the girl of an Eastern Roman empress. The woman smiles at the girl as if she knows her. "Who are you?" asks the girl, more puzzled than ever. She had never seen this woman before. The woman laughs and places a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "I am Zinaida," she answers simply. The next morning, the girl awakens and is confused about her dream. She decides to ask her mother if there are any relatives in the family named Zinaida. The mother replies that they have nobody with that name in the family, and asks why she has that question. The girl recounts the dream, and they decide to make a phone call to their local priest. After consulting the Synaxarion of the saints, the priest informs them that there is a Saint Zinaida, whose feast day is on October 11th, and that she is a holy unmercenary healer of the early church. The girl is bewildered by all this, but goes on her vacation as planned. When she returns, she visits her doctors to get final imaging of her lungs before the surgery. While they prepare her for the imaging, they explain to her that cysts of that nature continue to grow, and sometimes very quickly, and the surgeon needs to know how much larger the cyst has grown before he operates on her. She returns home, wondering what they will find. Later that day, the girl receives a phone call from the hospital. She assumes it might be the nurse or the image specialist, who will brief her on her condition and give her instructions on how to prepare for her impending procedure. Instead, she is astonished to hear her surgeon's voice on the phone. His voice is filled with disbelief. "Your cyst, which was previously the size of an orange, has shriveled and shrunk, and has become smaller than a raisin," her doctor says. "Surgery is now unnecessary, as your cyst has all but vanished, and is not inhibiting your breathing or impairing your health in any way. I've seen several cases like yours, and have always seen that cysts grow over time, not shrink and practically disappear. You will have to monitor the cyst every year with imaging and tests to be sure that it is not growing and that it remains benign. But as long as it stays in this condition, you do not need the surgery. The girl is stunned. She immediately remembers the strange dream of Saint Zinaida, the unmercenary healer. She had never heard of her before the strange dream she'd experienced. She begins to research the saint online and finds more about her and her sister Philonella. She reads about their devotion to healing and reputation as wonder workers. She is surprised to learn of Saint Zinaida's dedication to studying mental illness. The girl had been suffering from depression and anxiety for years as a result of her difficult childhood and the recent passing of her grandfather, with whom she had been very close. She realizes that Saint Zinaida has healed her from the cyst and was bringing her emotional comfort after the difficulties and mental illnesses she had suffered for so long. Nearly 4 years later, the cyst in the girl's lung remains shrunken, and she still has no need for an operation. When physical illness hits us, we do not only suffer physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. Similarly, spiritual and mental illnesses often bring about physical illness and much suffering. God revealed this to His people early on. Even in the prayers of the Church, we often pray for His healing of soul and body. Such was the healing ministry of Saint Zinaida, or Zinais, of Tarsus, alongside her sister, Saint Philonella. Zinais and Philonella were born in the 1st century AD in Cilicia, a city in the Tarsus region of Asia Minor, the birthplace of St. Paul. Zinais was raised in a Greek-speaking Jewish household that prized education. She was gifted with a keen thirst for knowledge, which was cultivated by her family. Although uncommon for women at that time to receive education, Zinais and Philonella studied philosophy at a well-known local academy. They soon developed an interest in medical theorism, which involves the study of underlying causes of disease. They were not seeking out learning merely for the sake of abstract knowledge, but for the purpose of applying all their knowledge and studies to ease the suffering of others. It is not surprising that a family so dedicated to the pursuit of truth and helping others out of pure love would follow Christ, who is the ultimate love and truth. One of Zinaida's cousins, Jason, who was serving as the Bishop of Tarsus at the time, was a follower of their mutual relative, St. Paul the Apostle. Bishop Jason was taught by St. Paul, and he passed on his knowledge and love of Christ to Zinaida and Philonella, who embraced the faith and were baptized. The sisters' zeal for the study of medicine grew as they discovered that much of what they learned in science garnered much more clarity in the light of the teachings of their newfound faith. Christianity taught them that both the soul and body were united as one in what constitutes a human being in its entirety. Contrary to what the pagan religions surrounding them taught, the soul and body are not at enmity with one another. The body is neither evil nor is it a prison for the soul. The soul is not freed or escapes from the body upon death. The separation of soul and body are unnatural to humanity, because this separation is the result of death, which was not God's will for humanity. Death is a result of human sin, and the separation from God, the source of life. Christ has defeated death through his death on the cross and his resurrection. In himself, he united humanity to God, accomplishing for us what we failed to do. Upon Christ's second coming, soul and body will be reunited, and the final resurrection of all human beings will take place. As proclaimed by Zinaida's cousin, the Apostle of the Nations, St. Paul, in the 5th chapter of his second letter to the Corinthians, our souls will not remain naked or unclothed without our bodies. Rather, our souls will be further clothed by our transformed immortal bodies. Our soul's departure from our bodies upon death is therefore only temporary. God created man in his own image and likeness. So the image and likeness of God must be honored in every human, by reuniting soul and body. God intends to be worshipped by us as complete human beings, with both soul and body, since the union of both was his intention for us from the beginning. As soon as they completed their studies, Zinaida and Philonella began offering medical treatment to all who sought it, and this newfound Christian understanding informed the way they treated their patients. They understood that their patients needed spiritual as well as physical treatment, and that the only true source of healing is Christ. They did not turn anyone away, and they did not accept monetary payment for their services. Because of their lack of concern for money and their compassionate work in easing the sorrow and suffering of others through medical healing, Zinaida and Philonella later became known in the Church as holy unmercenaries and as friends of peace. Since the sisters knew that Christ is the source of healing, and that any healing which they were able to bring to their patients was through his love and mercy, sharing with them the gospel was just as important to their ministry as the medical treatment of their patients. Thessaly, in central Greece, was the perfect place for their ministry, because the region is home to the Pelion mountain, which houses a multitude of caverns containing mineral spring water. Not only did the sisters wish to use the natural minerals and pure water for the medical advantage of their patients, but they also wanted to quash the pagan worship and temples centered around the springs. Zinaida and Philonella moved from Tarsus to Thessaly, and built a clinic and chapel in the nearby caves, which was also where they lived. The sisters worked tirelessly to evangelize the region, heal the sick, and separate medical studies from pagan worship and superstition. Pagans and Christians alike sought out the sisters for healing, for their ability to cure even the most serious, seemingly hopeless cases could not be denied. The sisters knew how the pagan doctors would mistreat and take advantage of the poor, and cater only to the wealthy, and that the patients of pagan doctors would be spiritually deceived, regardless of their monetary status. Though doctors and healers, even of that time, had been taking the Hippocratic oath, and swore to do no harm and always act in the best interest of their patients, pagan priests and priestesses knew exactly what to do to deceive, intimidate, and awe their patients into paying huge sums of money. This money was supposedly used in offerings to appease and propitiate Asclepios and Ygea, the god and goddess of healing, but was instead used to line the pockets of those working in the temples. Upon entering such temples, the sick and suffering were met with huge imposing statues of Asclepios and Ygea, which appeared to coldly stare them down. Covering the walls of the temples were tablets with false accounts of miraculous healings. The temples were teeming with priests and priestesses, and scribes recording the supposed miracles. The buildings surged with desperate patients and their families. Of late, however, as the word spread about Zenaida and Philonella, the pagan temples were emptying increasingly, as were the pockets of the pagan priests. The priests and priestesses were becoming increasingly afraid of losing their wealth and power over the people. When the pagans discovered that the cause of their troubles were just two women who had no home or money, and who preached a radical new religion of a crucified God, they were enraged. They prayed day in and day out, making sacrifices and offerings to their gods to rid the region of these troublemakers, and to render the sisters' abilities useless, but to no avail. The pagan temples and medical centers of Thessaly, once the beating heart of pagan medicine, were now deserted, decayed, and crumbled to the ground. Before long, Zenaida and Philonella were sought out for reasons unrelated to their medical practice. Many Christian men and women had seen the sisters' austere, ascetic life, since they never accepted payment. They had no money, and they lived in caves they'd converted into humble cells. The sisters' way of life was so admired by these Christians that they wanted to partake of Zinaida's and Philonella's way of life and imitate their asceticism. Thus, an early form of monasticism flourished. Men and women took to separate caves, which they also converted into cells. Like Zenaida and Philonella, they had no possessions, and their focus in life became prayer and helping the sick and suffering. For a spiritual guide, they looked to Zinaida, who became their spiritual mother. As Zenaida and Philonella aged, their individual specialties distinguished themselves. Philonella devoted herself to studying and purifying the study of medicine, ridding it from pagan influence. She soon gained many students who wished to learn medicine and healing from her. Zinaida's focus became aiding the spiritual advancement of those who entrusted their souls to her care, as well as becoming a pioneer in pediatric and psychiatric medicine. She felt deeply for suffering children, and her compassion was also moved by the multitude of patients who came to her clinic with intense depression, anxiety, and hosts of other mental illnesses. She recognized that illness could occur in the mind, just as it could occur in the body and soul. And she dedicated herself to studying the reasons behind these illnesses, as well as easing the pain of those who suffered from them. When or how Zenaida died is unknown, but there are some traditions that she was martyred at the hands of the vengeful and spiteful pagan priests. After her sister's passing, Philonella left much of the patient care to her students and focused on asceticism. Even so, her reputation for miraculous healings grew as more and more seemingly impossibly cured patients became attributed to her. As with her sister, Zinaida, we do not know when or how Philonella departed this life. We do know she died at an advanced age, and that she preached finding peace through Christ. She believed that peace found through Christ was capable of preventing illness and bringing about healing according to His will, or bring comfort and strength to those who suffered if it were not His will for a particular patient to recover. Similarly, Zinaida's final words were said to be prayers for world peace. In converting to Christianity, Zenaida and Philonella knew that death is not the end of our existence. Both sisters are recognized and venerated as saints in the Orthodox Church, with their feast day being observed every year on the 11th of October. Although among the lesser-known saints of the Church, Saint Zinaida's and Saint Philonella's compassion and healing intercessions continue even millennia after their departure from this life. Saint Zinaida and Philonella were the first Christian doctors after Saint Luke the Evangelist, and they were the first saints to be called holy unmercenaries. The unmercenary tradition flourished after these saints left this life, and the Church now counts a great multitude of holy healers who would not accept money amongst her most wonder-working saints. Thus, both Christian medicine and the unmercenary tradition has its roots in these holy women. It has often been said that the devil often harbors more anger toward the saints than toward Christ. Saints of the Church who are members of the heavenly Church, or the Church triumphant, have continued to appear to members of the earthly Church, the Church militant, and to work wonders for those living on earth through their intercessions. As written by Saint Zinaida's cousin, Saint Paul the Apostle, in the 15th chapter of his first letter to the Corinthians, "If the dead do not rise, then Christ is not risen. And if Christ is not risen, your faith is futile. Then also those who have fallen asleep in Christ have perished. If in this life only we have hope in Christ, we are of all men most pitiable. By appearing to those still living on this earth, and showing healing proof of their intercessions, the saints show us that they have not perished, and that Christ is truly risen. If this were not so, the saints would not be able to appear to us, to intercede for us, and to bring about such miracles through our living Christ, who loves us more deeply than anyone can comprehend. We know that our faith is not futile, and that Christ is not merely a righteous man who preached love and tolerance, but he is true God of true God. Thus, the devil's lies about Christ are foiled by the saints, and this angers him. Saints Zinaida and Philonella, servants and witnesses to the true God, intercede for the healing and salvation of our souls and bodies, and for peace for this world.